This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian, and Mr. Betcher is out again. We tape these in advance, so he's actually probably back from his vacation. But for matters of production, I wanted to make sure he didn't have to jump back into podcasting this week. Right off the bat. So I'm hoping he's back. He'll definitely back next week. So we'll be back at full strength, and won't just have to listen to my voice like we have been doing the last couple of weeks. So. This week, like last week we did with Cheryl Biswas, we talked about ICS and SCADA and TierraCon. This week we're going to go back kind of somewhat to our roots with a gentleman Mr. Frates, Jarrod Frates. He's been on a couple of times. I think, when was the last time you were on, Jarrod? Was that with Mick Douglas?
Yeah, it was either that or DerbyCon. I forget which one happened first.
I think it was probably DerbyCon. I think we had Mick and you on when Mr. Betcher was gone last July or August or something. So, yes, welcome, Mr. Jarrod Frates, to the show again. We appreciate you filling in for Mr. Betcher while he is out on vacation.
I'm always happy to fill in for the slacker.
Yeah, I know, right? People taking vacation. What's that all about, Yeah. No, he had a good time. I think I haven't hit him up to find out how well how he's doing, but he drives everywhere. He doesn't fly. He's got he's got a whole litter of children, so he can't fly, which I understand.
Expensive.
It does, yeah. I know. Yeah, so he does a lot of driving. Like he was in Colorado this week. He was at Rocky Mountain National Park outside of Denver. Denver. So, sorry, it's a Broncos thing. I don't like the Denver Broncos, which is a United States football team, national football team here. So they are my hated enemies. Go Chargers.
Okay, I prefer Northwest Colorado anyway.
Well, yeah, I think that's in West Central North.
Yeah, I prefer up to the Fort Collins area.
Oh, okay.
It's a little quiet. It's a little more rural.
Yeah,
a little closer to nature.
Bit more chill, yeah. Okay, so how Mr. Jarrod here works for a small company. We had some of his other colleagues on a couple of weeks ago, Adam Crompton and Tyler Robinson from InGuardians. He as well, of course, works for InGuardians with the Mr. J. Beal and the Mr. Pesce. And he is here this week to talk about something that a lot of blue teamers and companies have to deal with, and he's kind of ancillary to this process. It's how to make sure you're actually getting the right pen tester for the job.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, now it's something that I run into every once in a while because I see, well, not so much in the current because some of the rules are a little more strict, but my previous employer, I saw some of the penetration test reports that were getting handed over, and I've realized that a lot of our clients were not really getting their money's worth, or at least if they were paying anything close to the normal market rates, they weren't getting their money's worth. Maybe they were, but that suggests they weren't paying very much.
Yeah, I've worked at a previous company with Mr. Betcher, and some of the pen test reports I got were just god awful. I mean, it's like the pen testers didn't even know what they were doing.
Hey, this thing's broke. You should fix it.
Yeah. This one guy, he came in, and he, spent a couple days poking around on the systems, and his last name was Frates too. Do you know him?
I might.
No,
I hear he broke a lot of things.
Yeah. So, just a little backstory. I've known Mr. Frates since he came and did a pen test at our company. He was our second pen tester that came in. The first pen tester was great, but the second guy was moving along, so they had Jarrod come in, and he did a really great job. He found a lot of stuff that the first guy, I wouldn't say he missed, but I think there was this different tack that both of you take, and it's like it's like an artist, you with a bowl of fruit. If he's one artist is going to paint his interpretation of the fruit, and the other pen tester or the other artist is going to have a completely different interpretation of that bowl of fruit.
That can happen.
Yeah.
But it's a really tricky thing because, and I've mentioned this in the past when I was on with Mick. I think it was that I very much view what we do with computing, not just on the security side of things, but just in general. I view what we do not so much as a science, but an art. I mean, there's a million people out there who have computer science degrees, and I think most of them don't realize that what they're really doing is artwork. If you're a painter, knowing the chemistry of your particular paints, if you're a sculptor, knowing the mechanics of how your medium works, those are really, really important things. But in the end, the path that you take to get somewhere and the end result are artwork. And there is just far too little that we really know about these incredibly complex interactions that really turns this into an art. And I think it was at Black Hat or DEF CON last year. There was a or maybe it's happening this year. I'm a little fuzzy on things of late. I've just been really busy with some things. That DARPA was sponsoring a completely automated CTF. And the idea was that they would come up with this, they had come up with this really simple architecture. It wasn't really complex like the x86 architecture or even the ARM architecture. It was this much simpler Turing complete architecture. But the number of instructions available and the software that could be built on it was rather simple. And the idea was that participants would build a system that would basically run against it in a CTF contest, and whoever captured the most flags through a completely automated architecture would end up winning. No interactivity involved. And at some point, from a sort of distant perspective, I love my job, but realistically, at some point we need to get to that level in order to really, in order to be able to secure the data that we need. But honestly, I think we're decades away.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that contest. That I don't know if there was actually a clear winner, but there was definitely some inroads being made by certain teams and stuff. And a lot of that I think is probably just better machine learning. I don't want to call it artificial intelligence because it doesn't exist in the sense that we believe it is. But I think as we get better with machine learning and with our algorithms and our methods by which we do our pen testing and contests in this case, I think that will we'll see a winner one day. I think it was like the DARPA challenge where they had self-driving cars on the track. The first year nobody made it to cross the finish line, and then like the second year they had like 25 teams make it because machine learning only gets better with human input and and better knowing what to expect from the obstacles itself. So so we got a little off there, but let's start talking about why companies need to what companies need to do to get a good pen tester, or maybe they don't even need a pen tester at all.
That is actually a really key point. I've done tests for companies that are not ready for pen tests. Everybody wants to get a pen test because they want to find out where their vulnerabilities are. Honestly, there are a lot of companies that would do better to spend their money on a copy of Nessus or Qualys or something along those lines, and get the low-hanging fruit handled. Because if you're bringing me in at whatever the rates are, and this isn't a matter of like trade secrets. I honestly really don't know how much we charge. I'm not even sure how much the previous company charged, but it's a fair chunk of money.
Yeah.
And if you bring us in to find out that you're vulnerable to shell shock. Well, shell shock was published 2 years ago almost, and it was patched within days, and you don't really want to be paying us a whole bunch of money to tell you, oh, you're vulnerable to shell shock and we can get a shell off of it. Okay, you could spend a couple $1,000s on Nessus and get that.
Yeah.
Instead you want to be bringing people in when you've at least put together a good faith estimate, not estimate, a good faith effort to try and hit the low hanging fruit. And you want to bring the pen testers in at the point where you're now getting less of a return on your own efforts, and you need to bring in somebody who's a little bit more dedicated to this. Unfortunately, there are a ton of companies out there that claim to do penetration tests. Some of them are large, some of them are small. I've seen some very large companies that do a really fantastic job. I've seen large companies that are not really very good at what they do. It's not always an indictment of the people. Some of them are just drastically overworked. I've got one friend who did penetration testing, and when he got into it, he was assigned. He would go in and he would work for a week for a client, and then he would go the next week. He would start a new pen test for another client. Except he was also doing reporting for the previous week's client at the same time that he's doing the new pen test, and that just leads to burnout.
Sure.
Or if it doesn't lead to burnout, it leads to a potentially substandard product.
Yeah. Well, so do you think that the majority of the pen test companies out there have risen because of the need for people to check a box? Many compliance frameworks require a yearly pen test. Now, I can go to Guardians and pay $150,000 to check a box. I'm just round numbers here, because I know that you guys are not. And this is not an advertisement for Guardians, isn't it? But you command a premium price because you have the services that you have. Now I can go down to Bob's pen testing company and pay $50,000 for a quote unquote pen test that will satisfy an auditor for my PCI requirements. Am I checking a box in that case? Yes. But when the world is falling apart on my network, and I can't have an Guardians type level pen test come in to check a box. Is that why we have the Bob's pen testing services? Because of the rise of those compliance requirements?
It's a big part of it. There's also something about it. There's also some marketing aspect to it. So back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, we saw the rise of the SSL security checks. That you get the little logo down in the corner of your screen, or not the SSL security checks, but like the virus security checks. And you get the little logo down in the corner of the site. The site has been confirmed free of viruses by McAfee or Symantec or whatever. And there were a lot of people who they would just like download the logo and load it, locally, saying that they had it and not pay for the service. And it didn't really mean anything. But it was good from a marketing perspective. And you've got companies that are coming in now saying, hey, we take your privacy and your data security seriously. We get a pen test every year or every quarter or something like that. And some of them aren't doing it, I'm sure. Others are doing it, but they're bringing in whoever gives them the cheapest quote. And so for whatever reason, you get the rise of what John Strand calls these pen test puppy mills, where they come in and they really don't do a whole lot. And they give you a report that doesn't really mean anything and that doesn't tell you really what it is that you need to do. There was one that made the round. There was a weblog post that made the rounds a couple of years ago. Somebody who had read one of these puppy mills, these pen test puppy mill reports, and it had things like, so there's this finding, and it's really bad, and we'll fix it for you for like $300.
Yeah.
And there are companies out there that use pen testing as a sales intro, and that's also a giant problem. If you're going to get a pen test, you want to get it from a company that is not using it as a sales lead. because at that point you can never really be quite certain that they're giving you all the information that you need to protect your or to fix your environment and
Sure.
and to be able to give it a protection, because they may be holding off on something to maybe be able to sell later. Now, at the previous company that I was at, it was, they're a Fortune 500 company. We maintained a significant degree of independence, and it was something that we fiercely protected. My boss went to the mat for me on one occasion, and I can't get into details on it. It's all internal stuff. But my boss went to the mat for me on one occasion where the client wanted the original Word copy of the report so that they could make what they referred to as corrections. And we basically told them, you can have the PDF copy, and we can work with you on the corrections, but or at least what you refer to as corrections. And we made a couple of them, we refused a few others. But that's not always the case. That sort of independence is not always the case. And in a lot of situations, that independence gets pushed aside in favor of making money for the services groups.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to trust the results that come out of something along those lines.
I can understand that. So let's do the. So the way that you're going to talk about this, is this how you guys do it at InGuardians, where you come in and you have like there must be some kind of thing before you actually start the pen test. So, what happens before you actually start the pen test in this case? There must be a phase of how this all goes.
It depends on the company. Some companies put out RFPs. Some companies get a word of mouth type of thing. InGuardians has relied heavily on word of mouth for a very long time, and it's done pretty well for us. I can honestly say we're a well-respected company. We do our bit of marketing. You'll see us at some conferences here and there, but we're not out there doing a huge number of things. And there are a lot of small companies that are like that they'll do the sort of presence-based marketing, but a lot of the stuff just ends up being word of mouth. But however things get started, the important thing really is that from the customer side of things, the important thing is that you know what you're getting into. It's one thing to read through the PCI requirements and say, okay, well, I need a pen test that that hits all of these points. If you're looking through the HIPAA guidance, you're going to get even less information about what has to be covered. Yeah. If you're just looking for a general pen test, now you're just sort of winging it. And if you don't know what you want when you're going into it, or in some cases from a regulatory perspective, if you don't know what you need going into it, you can end up just wasting money, wasting effort, wasting time. And in the end, you end up with a lot of people that are just really super frustrated.
Yeah. So the important thing is you have to, before you even contact whatever company you're talking to, you need to get, various stakeholders in your organization, sit them down and go, okay, we need to do a pen test. One, why do we need the pen test? Okay. Yeah. Purpose of the pen test is because we need to satisfy FedRAMP requirements. And according to FedRAMP requirements, it requires us to have at least a pen test every year. Or, PCI requires us to do a pen test on the cardholder data network, or any, machine or asset that holds cardholder data, including network, internetworking connections, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, that could be a long process just in itself, because defining the scope of the pen test, a lot of times, I don't know how it is with you, but with many companies that I've seen, I was a consultant for only a short amount of time, but the 3 or 4 companies I've seen, they didn't even know where all their data was located. So it seems to me that those are, a lot of the basics that need to be done should and need to be done before you even reach out to a pen tester and say, hey, this is something we need to do. I mean, is it worth it to make sure you know where all your data is, everything's classified properly, and take the hit on having, get more check boxes for compliance done, and go, oh, well, we didn't have enough time to do the pen test, and just have one box on that.
That gets really tricky because at certain levels of PCI, if you don't get that pen test, your QSA may well just fail you. And if you're Home Depot or a Target, maybe you can get away with that, by putting, hey, caveats. We've done all of these other things, and we're we're showing progress. If you're a smaller company and you lose your certification, and especially if it happens a couple of times in a row, you may lose your ability to process credit cards, and that gets really ugly.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I've run into on a number of occasions is people who need PCI pen tests, and they don't understand the scoping issue. They think, okay, well, I need to get these 5 systems tested because that's where my credit card data is. And
yeah,
it gets scoped out, and then we get in there, we realize, well, your domain controller and your email server are also on this. They're on the same subnet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they're in scope. We have to test those. Well, why do you have to test those? There's no credit card data on them. Because we don't know. There's a direct contact capability there. Yep. Also, we need to test your firewalls, and we need to test your routers, and we need to test your switches.
Yep.
And they don't catch that. And then we point them to the PCI requirements, and they're kind of like, oh, that's what that means. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
There's a general lack of understanding of the and that's what I think. I think the QSA should be a year-round prospect. They should be an advisory, not just a guy who's going to come in and pass fail you. There should be some real communication with your auditors year-round, not necessarily just it's not like a doctor's appointment. You should be talking to your auditors regularly. Hey, I'm going to be putting this system in. How would you suggest that we configure it, or how should we set this network up that would not run afoul of FedRAMP or NIST requirements or whatever. It's not just a one-time thing, I think, with your auditor in that case.
Yeah, and I've actually seen a number of companies that have decided to stop taking credit card numbers, and they have started outsourcing their credit card services to like Square and the others, because the extra percentage that it costs them to do that, they just judge it as being worth it, not having to go through the steep requirements. So.
Well, I mean, you've got additional issues there if that's the case, because you're looking at third-party business agreements. You're looking at making sure that they maintain their PCI requirements or whatever it is requirements they have, SOC, PCI, those kinds of things. So, I mean, your third-party business agreements also add another layer of complexity that you may not have realized before. So
true, but in many cases, it can either reduce your penetration testing requirements, or in some cases eliminate them. If you're not handling anything and you're still at the level that you can self-certify, that ends up saving you some money that you can put towards securing other parts of your architecture.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so we had our stakeholders in. Let's say we have managed to define what the scope of our pen test is. For compliance requirements, we have to test X, Y, and Z. At what point should they contact you? Is there something like should they be creating a list of, okay, these are things we need to do before we even contact the pen tester? Or should we go ahead and contact you and set up dates? And how does a typical engagement work for you? Do they already come in and go, okay, we're ready to go? Here's the dates we can give you.
It depends on the customer. Those that have never had a penetration test will oftentimes come in a little more delicately, because they're not quite sure what they're going to get back from us. Mm-hmm. And those that have had a penetration test in the past will come in and say, okay, well, these are the things that we need, and these are the things that have changed. And here's, in some cases, we'll find out who they had in the past. Which sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. Occasionally we know who they've had in the past, and we kind of go, oh, really? All right, well, let's see if we can outdo them. And in other cases, we kind of go, who?
Yeah.
And those are sometimes interesting, because we sometimes deliver some interesting reports at the end of those. But you know, if you've never had one before, be prepared to modify your expectations.
So be flexible.
Yes, you need to be flexible. If you come in and you say, okay, we want you to test. We've got 12,000 workstations, 3,000 servers, 2,500 mobile devices, and we need you to test them all in a week.
Yeah,
it's probably not going to happen. Or at least if it is going to happen, you're not going to get a whole lot of information back, because we're going to be spending all of our time trying to figure out how to effectively do that. In one of those, in a case like that, we're going to come back and say, okay, well, how about let's test 10% of the workstations, or maybe even 5% at that level. A larger percentage of the servers, but maybe we're testing 25%, but it's like a representative set. We don't need to test all of your Exchange CAS servers.
Mm-hmm.
If we only need to test one out of your cluster of 10 to get a good idea of where things are at. We don't have to test all 100 of your domain controllers. We can test 2 or 3 of them in most cases and get a good idea of where things are at. Although that's getting a little bit ahead of things, but you do need to be flexible. You need to know who overall needs to be involved. If you've never had a penetration test and you have no idea where your security level is, it's probably not the best time to get a penetration test. Like I said earlier, you've got some other things that you really should be working on before that. But if you're really hell-bent on getting it, or if you think that you've got the basics in place, but you're just not sure, but you think, okay, you know what, we think we're ready. Figure out who needs to be involved. And that's going to depend on the level of the penetration test that you want. If you want something that's along the lines of, we've got our infrastructure in place, but we just really have no idea how good it is, you probably are going to be better off letting a number of people know. For one, if you just have the one security guy, he's not even an official security guy, he's just off in the corner, but he perks up every time somebody does an intensive scan of the network, then you should probably let him know so he doesn't spaz that this one IP address keeps sending stuff in, and especially if he's noticing attack traffic. If you are further down the line and you have a security operations center and you have people that are monitoring either 24/7 or you have automated alerts that are going off on critical things overnight so that people can check at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you're testing their response capabilities, you probably don't want to let them know, because you don't want to take the risk that they're actually going to be looking for things. We've had cases where literally 2 people in the entire company, and a fairly large company, where 2 people know about the test. And they're watching to see what we're able to do. And, they're looking to see, maybe on phishing, they're looking to see how many people, how many end users report it.
Maybe we could discuss now what a pen test is versus what a pen test is not.
Sure. And this is something that people run into, and this is actually one of the leading problems that leads into getting a bad penetration test. And basically, a penetration test is not a vulnerability scan. It is not a security audit. It is not a code review. These are things that are all good things to have happen in your environment. But if somebody comes in and they run Nessus or Qualys and they call that the pen test, that's just not going to cut it. A security audit is a completely different animal. That's usually when you have somebody who comes in and says, okay, tell me about all your practices and procedures, and I need to see all the documentation that backs it up. Maybe they go through and they look over your configurations, they look over your firewall rules, they look over your IDS signatures, things like that. Yeah, that's not a penetration test, because they're not actually trying to subvert your environment. And then with a code review, that is something that is often very far outside of the scope of the pen test. We do some code review. At InGuardians, we get these a few times a year. And but a proper, detailed, full application code review is something that can take a very long time, that you need people who are really dedicated experts in the particular language that you're writing in, or languages, as is the case now. And you get a lot of things that are being built in C, C++, Java, JavaScript, and they throw some Node.js in there just to be, annoying.
Yeah.
And it can be helpful when we're trying to pin down why something happened, but it's not something that we're really geared to do on a very large scale basis. So those are things that a penetration test is not. And again, those are things you all want at some point or another. They're just not a pen test. Getting at what a pen test is, it's a process of finding flaws in your environment with the goal of subverting your defenses or subverting your systems and taking some level of control. Now, ultimately, we would like to get in and take complete and utter control and show you all your passwords. That's always a really cool thing for us to do, and we do a little happy dance when it happens, or at least some of us do.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to talk my colleague Adam into doing a dance, but he's done fencing before, so I just like to imagine that he pulls a sword off the wall and does a little Zorro thing.
Very nice.
And I think Tyler does a happy dance. I wouldn't be surprised. But we're trying to get some level of control that we're not supposed to get, and the goal, of course, is for us to get it before the bad guys do.
Yeah,
which doesn't always happen.
Something I want to ask about. So you said a code review is not a pen test, but what about something like a web application review? Would that be considered part of a pen test, or would that be different than a code review?
A web app, yeah. So web app testing gets into sort of a fuzzy spot, and we do some code review as sort of a necessity because of, we look at the client side stuff. We go through the JavaScript, we go through the HTML. In some cases, we get Java apps, or we get Flash stuff that comes down, and we'll go through that. There are some cases where we have apps, mobile apps, that we will take apart, and we'll find things that way. But in general, we don't see things that are going on the server. We just have, maybe we get some API documentation. In some cases, we can download things. If somebody's using, for example, if somebody's using Jira, Jira's open source, so we can download that and we can get an idea. But in most of those cases, we don't usually find new vulnerabilities that way. It happens every once in a while, but it's not something that happens all that often. Usually, it's the custom applications that we're poking at that we realize that we're able to do some things with, and there's still a lot of experimentation. So if we find some indication that you have SQL injection, if we had access to the server side, we could point to, oh, this line in this file is where you need to switch over from your dynamic queries over to over to structured queries. That's an easy thing to do, but we don't usually get that luxury. We end up doing a lot of experimentation to try and get at things. So yeah, it does get a little fuzzy in those particular cases.
Yeah. So for you, the product or the thing that your deliverables is the report. That's what you're supposed to give them, and that is what they're expecting from you. There's nothing additional like, I don't know what other deliverables you might be able to give them other than the report. I mean, do you always?
Yeah, there's sometimes some other deliverables, but ultimately the report is the final product. It's what we're going to be remembered by. Something that happens a year later, if you get a situation where you get a high turnover and everybody that participated in the pen test is gone, but the report is still there because your infrastructure is still largely the same.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter if we get in and we get domain admin on all 6 of your domains in 2 separate independent forests, and we get in and we take over your Oracle boxes and we get at the Linux systems underneath and we get full root access, and that doesn't matter if we hand you a crappy report that you can't do anything with.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's why you're mentioning here in your slide. I'm sorry for listeners. Jarrod actually has a talk that he was giving, so he's gonna be polishing this up at some point and giving it out again. But we're going through some of the stuff. So you said it has to be professional, methodical, and reproducible. Is that most companies follow processes or standards. Is it important for you guys to follow very similar processes and standards so that a company will know that they're getting, a specific level of pen test every time? Like there's PTES, there's OSIM, there's OS, something.
OSSTMM.
That's it, OSSTMM. So, I mean, is there a specific guideline you guys follow and that you guys sell to a company when you go, okay, we do pen test, we follow this guidelines, that way that this is a worldwide recognized, level of pen testing, everything is reproducible, we follow certain methods, that kind of thing?
We have our own methodology. It is in some ways it's similar to PTES, and in some ways it differs a bit. Part of it is just changes that we found are more practical. I shouldn't say changes that we found are more practical, because that makes it sound like we started with PTES and branched off from that. But there's any good pen test organization is going to end up moving in similar directions. And while PTES and OSSTMM and some of the others compete to a degree, the basic flow is still kind of the same. Where you come in and you're looking for some things and you try to exploit them, and then once you do, there's some post-exploitation activities, and then after that you kind of start the whole circle over again. Reconnaissance, the formal one that you usually see is something along the lines of reconnaissance, scanning, exploitation, post-exploitation, and then you kind of start over because theoretically you now have a new starting point that you can do recon from. Sure. You should be able to reproduce the results. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There are some things that are just a royal pain in the neck to get to work right the first time. And so getting them to work right the second time is sometimes impossible. There are a handful of cases where you have like a 1 in 128 chance or less of something working. This happens with some ASLR implementations. So, if you want to land on the right spot, and this is usually in 32-bit architectures, if you want to land in the right spot in an application that's doing ASLR, you have a 1 in 128 chance in many of these cases. If you can keep spraying stuff in, then it's not hard to hit that. But if for whatever reason, maybe the service is unstable and it takes time to recover, or just the attack takes a while to set up and it's, sort of ends up being a sort of one shot each time you do it, that 1 in 128 chance starts to become really kind of difficult to reproduce. But you want to be able to explain everything that you've done on how you actually get up to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's also if it's reproducible, but in reproducing it, you broke something. You don't want to be necessarily reproducible, and that's something you'd put in your report. Hey, during our testing, we knocked on this port and it knocked over your application. We can show you how to do it, or here's a small video of what we did the first time. If you're, I don't know if you guys do videos regularly, but here's what we did to cause it to happen. We don't recommend you doing it, but here's how we recommend you fixing it.
Videos, screenshots. There should be evidence getting collected. Yeah. And that's really kind of the critical thing. And even if there's not screenshots, because every once in a while it's happened to me and it happens to everybody that the screenshot that we thought we got is not the one that we actually did. But you should really be able to explain what happened. Mm-hmm. So even if you can't put a screenshot in the report, use this command that got you to this stage, and being able to narrow in on what you did and how you got the final result is really important, because they may have the skill to reproduce it. Yeah. And any good report should give enough information that somebody who is reasonably good at security stuff should be able to reproduce it, or at least get a good understanding of it.
Cool.
So, so when you're building up to the test, kind of think back to, in grade school, when you were learning how to write a story. You learn the 5 W's in H: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And if you were on the school newspaper, those got filled into you even further. as happened to me. But they're a little bit changed. So you want to figure out who is going to be involved with the test, and that involves inside, that's outside, that's third party, all of that. You need to figure out what is going to be tested. Is it your PCI environment? Is it your domain architecture? Is it your new web app that you just rolled out? Is it the web app that you've had rolled out for the last 5 years and it's never been tested? Getting in, and by the way, if it's a web app, how far in are we allowed to go? Is it just to the web server? Is it the application server that's behind that? Is it the SQL server that's even further behind that? Is it to the domain controller that has nothing to do with it, but we might be able to reach? When is the testing going to be performed? And there's two things on this one. And for the love of all that is holy and right in the world, please, if you absolutely must do something overnight, let us know a few weeks ahead of time. It takes time for us to transition to night shift.
Yeah.
It's those first couple of days are going to be really rough on us. If you decide to tell us on Friday that the test that starts on Monday is supposed to be overnight. But before you do a night test, also keep in mind that, okay, maybe you've got the contract with us to only do our testing at night, but I doubt you have a contract with the guys out of Romania and China and Russia to only do their attacks at night. So
I totally understand. And the idea is, it's a lot like with vulnerability management. I'm told at my office, hey, we want to scan after 5 p.m. Pacific, which is 8 p.m. Eastern time. So if I'm scanning at, say, if the scan's running overnight at midnight and something breaks or goes down, we have to now hunt people down. We have to wake them up. They're not going to be at their best. I always try to advocate for a during the day kind of scan because everybody's on hand, everybody's available. You can always pull in multiple resources and that kind of thing. I would imagine it's along the very same lines, unless they have like a 24-hour manned SOC or something like that is always going to have people there. It's kind of a pain in the ass to, one, for you to be transitioning to night shift because you're groggy and you're not feeling your best anyway. But, them having to be woken up to go, okay, yeah, this was actually part of a pen test. And, okay, now we're in incident response because you found something at 3 a.m.
Yeah. And I hate to drag personal lives into it too, but, if we're working nights, let's say it's like an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. window. That also means that we're really not seeing our families during that time. And
yeah.
That can be really tough, especially with young kids that they don't understand necessarily what's going on. They just know that there's a parent that's sleeping and they have to be quiet all day because it's really important for the parent to get the rest before they work all night long. And then they're up and can't be bothered. It's not really fair. So moving on a little bit, so we don't turn this into a 6-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Which I've been trying to get you to do, but you seem to have this whole thing with being with your family too. So anyway, you want to figure out where testing will happen. Now, if you're doing remote testing, this is usually a bit easier. We'll let you know, here are the IP addresses that things are coming from, so that at least when you see it in the logs, even if you are allowing blocking, when you see it in the logs, you know where it's coming from, and you know that you don't have to get a full response necessarily towards it. But if it's going to be an internal test, you really need to think about this. One, if you're going to do it over a VPN, realize that you are hamstringing us. There are things that we will not be able to do that we can do on site. We will not get any sort of indications of like overhearing things. So you're not going to get sort of the internal view of things, the rogue internal person view of things. We are not going to be able to do any sort of ARP spoof type things in most cases. We won't be able to move around to different networks very easily. Our perspective becomes limited. Yes, it's less expensive because you're not paying for travel. But at the same time, you're getting the same view of somebody who manages to crack into your web app and get access to your internal network. And it's really not that different from it.
Yeah.
So I understand that not everybody can afford the on-site testing, but it's important to keep in mind that the on-site testing is really, really hard to replicate without actually bringing somebody on site. And when you do, please make sure that they've got a comfortable space to work. We frequently bring along extra equipment, so we need a little bit of space. And also, it really sucks working in an 85-degree closet all week long.
Oh, yeah. So okay, so let's say this is a small business and they can't afford for the online, the flight and you to be stuck in a hotel room for 5 days and whatever. What would be the optimal method by which you could still give them a good pen test without you using a VPN? Would it be like them getting a laptop from you that they would set up in their environment, which would be like a trusted host or a bastion host kind of thing to be able to poke around inside the network? I mean, how would you go about doing that?
That is probably the best thing that can happen is, we put something in that connects back securely over our own VPN. But the idea is that we can then run some things locally that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. Keeping an eye on traffic that's coming across. And sometimes it's not even ARP spoofing. Sometimes it's just watching the broadcast traffic. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really amazing the kind of stuff that you can see. You can see LLM&R stuff going out. You can see the Bonjour, the MDNS traffic going out. You can see HSRP and OSPF hellos. Those are always fun, especially when you notice, they're using default passwords.
Oh, nice.
Look at that! I can now take control of some of the routing. So that's always a fun thing for us to do.
Okay.
But if you're in that situation, then there's that option. But the downside is that still, we're not overhearing things, and we're not there to really explain what's going on. Which is one of those benefits people don't really talk too much about, and I think we probably should press that a little bit more. That we can say, hey, knock on your door and say, hey, there's something we'd like to show you real quick. You should see this. And it's one thing to be able to say, hey, let's set up a screen sharing session to look at this, but there's nothing as critical in a lot of cases as a contractor knocking on your door saying you should come see this.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said overhearing things. You must mean like you're sitting in an office and you hear somebody yell down the hallway, "Hey, what's the password for this?" And somebody yells back the password. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
We see that.
Okay.
Or in one case, I was sitting in a room adjacent to an IT center, and I heard some guy in the help desk reset like 6 passwords, and they were all the same password. And so I was like, let me take this, and I already have a list of all the accounts. Oh, look at that! There's like 20 different accounts that use this password, so I'm just going to jump on. I know they have local admin. Oh, and there's a domain admin that's connected to this, or that was logged into the system too. So, boom, game over.
Beautiful.
So,
All right, so let's skip down to the next slide. Selecting a tester.
Well, before we jump to that real quick, let me finish up the 5 W's and H. So that was
my bad.
So that was the where. There's the why question, which we talked about earlier. So know why it's going on, and don't need to belabor that point. And then there's the how the tester will access the targets. And there's the whole where will the testing happen has something to do with that. Mm-hmm. But keep in mind that there are some cases, like if we're doing wireless, you might want to let the armed guards know that somebody's going to be walking around carrying weird-looking devices. If you have armed guards, please let them know not to freak out when they see this. So I haven't run into this myself. It's just a story that I've heard a couple of times at conferences where they say, and then there was a guy yelling "freeze" at me, and he's just trying to do some heat mapping.
Yeah, you don't want to be walking around with SDR and having a dog munching on your nethers. That wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it's a little easier to do now with tablets and stuff. It used to be you'd like carry a notebook around with stuff hanging off of it, and
I've done that.
That looks looks weird, and also it's really awkward. So,
yeah. Okay.
So selecting a tester, critical thing: expect to spend some money and expect to spend time. And now, that's not to say that you cannot get a good pen test for less expensive monies. Not everybody has the ability to drop 6 figures on a pen test. Yeah. Not everybody necessarily has the need to do it. If you're a small company and you've got 2 web servers, there is no need for you to spend $100,000 on a test. In most cases, you're going to be able to get away with something much, much simpler. Yeah. And there are a lot of places that their profit margin for the year is under the 1% mark, and so it becomes very difficult for them to, especially small company that has that sort of range. It becomes very difficult for them to justify spending that kind of money. But as Kevin Johnson has pointed out, everybody, even these companies need pen testing, and being able to come in and kind of hit the basics. Sometimes that's what happens. But in any case, you do need to expect to spend the money. You want to talk to the potential testers. Don't just talk to one company. You want to talk to multiple companies. And I say this with, knowing that some of our clients come in and they talk to us and they're happy and we deliver reports and we're able to help them, and that's fine. But we don't mind you going off and talking to other companies. You want to get at the technical and the business levels. You want to make sure they understand both what they're breaking and what the impact of what they're breaking is. Talk to them about their methodology, start to finish. How do they approach reconnaissance? Do they perform any sort of open source intelligence lookups? Are they, how do they do scanning? What do they do if they come across evidence of a previous compromise?
Or a current compromise?
Yes. So I have on a couple of occasions come across evidence of somewhere between previous and current. We didn't know if it was still going on, but it was clear that it had happened.
Yeah.
And it was really, the last time that happened to me was really a bummer because I was excited. I was like, yes, I'm going to get into this Windows system. And what's that file? Oh, damn it. That's a web shell.
Somebody's already gotten to it. So
anyway.
Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah. So ask about the backgrounds. There are a lot of companies out there that hire really good people, and they've just gotten started, and the company's only been around for a few months or maybe a couple of years. But the people have been in the industry for a while. It's just they've just now started to strike out on their own. At the same time, you want to be careful about companies that have been around for a number of years, and every single one of their testers only has 3 months of experience. That's a bit of a warning sign. And then you want to actually discuss your testing needs with them. Don't let them dictate your testing needs to you. They can offer advice. That's fine. We do that all the time. Mm-hmm. But if they come in and they say, well, you have to have this or you have to have that, you're sort of losing control over the process. And losing control to a hacker is never a good thing. Yeah. And then if you can, this really isn't possible in most cases because NDAs, mutual NDAs, just abound in this industry. Talk to some of the clients. Maybe you know some of the clients. Maybe you've heard from somebody who's had a test. They may not be able to tell you all the details of what happened and how the company came in and did things, but they can talk to you about their impression of how thorough things were, how they were treated, what sort of assistance they had in getting an effective test put together. Yeah. Hearing about that from an existing client is a really important thing.
The other thing is, you do kind of want to take that feedback with a grain of salt because the guy you're getting input from may have gotten an entirely different test done. So, he may have had a web application done and you need network testing done, or this guy's having, NIST, SOC, FedRAMP stuff done, and you're wanting just a web application pen test. So, and the shop that they used may not even be the shop that you would want to use because they maybe aren't as strong doing web application testing as another joint. So that's something you want to think about when you're also talking to and looking for input.
Yeah, that is the case. There are some circumstances where you may want to look for a specialized provider. For example, if you have a gigantic SAP or PeopleSoft installation, and you have like 600 active roles, not just 600 roles present, because both of those install a huge number of roles, but you have like 600 active roles, and it's across 15 servers. You may want to consider going with an ERP specialist in that case. Yeah. It's not that we can't find things; it's just that there are cases where specialized knowledge is or specialized in. A specialized outfit, that's where I was going, is a better choice.
So have you ever done that where they're like, oh, we need to do this using, we have massive, SAP or, CRM kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, yeah, you'd probably be better off using these people because they're kind of the experts in that.
I have not been involved enough in the sales process to know whether InGuardians has ever done that. I have tested ERP solutions both at InGuardians and at my previous company. It's a fun and interesting thing because they spit back some things you put input in, and they spit back things that get really kind of weird and very interesting. And I love going after ERP stuff. However, a very good friend of mine has been doing ERP for a very long time, and he's got like almost 20 years in ERP solutions. And even he says that these things are just, even if you have a giant team of people coming in and looking at them, they are so difficult to secure properly. And if you've had it in use for a long period of time, it can be almost impossible because you end up breaking things. So,
yeah. Well, I was just thinking, I don't see a lot of salespeople going, well, you can't really use us. You need to use somebody else. It's like anathema to them to go, oh yeah, we don't want your business. A lot
of it depends. If you come in and you tell us, and Jamie, Jay, Jimmy, don't kill me on this one. But if you come in and say you need a top to bottom complete view of everything going on in your ERP solution, there's a couple of things that we might do before we go off and say, you should go over to this other company because they're dedicated on this. We might say something like, we may need to look for an expert to assist us on this type of thing. It's just sort of the reality of things. Yeah. Not everybody knows everything, and in some cases you get these specialized situations where you need people that this is all they do. There are companies out there that do ERP stuff. They don't do network testing. They don't do web app testing. They do ERP. That's it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So asking questions. What is this about? Asking questions.
So when you're asking the questions, you want to be careful, you want to be you want to keep a very close eye on the way that they respond and the sort of information that they give. Some of the things that you're looking for past defensive experience. There are a lot of people that grew up, breaking things, and then they become a pen tester, and they become a pen tester so that they can break things legally. And as they do this, they don't necessarily understand what the ramifications are. It's one thing for me to come in and say, well, you need to completely scrap your entire infrastructure and rebuild it. That's not realistic. Just because I got in doesn't mean that you need to go out and spend $1 million rebuilding your architecture. That past defensive experience is going to give them a perspective on how you can go from your current defensive architecture to where you need to get, and maybe the steps that you can take in between. It's a nice thing to know, what your architecture should ideally look like, but knowing how to get there is at least as helpful as that. You want to look for companies that understand your technical and your business needs, that they know that you need to stay up and running, and they need to know where the risk is that they're going to take something down and interrupt your business. You want to look for special and custom tool use. You want to look for people that can write their own scripts or that have developed their own tools for specific situations. Metasploit and Nessus and SQL Map, and even Cobalt Strike, as awesome as Cobalt Strike is, these all have their place. But sometimes you need something that's written specifically for the given situation. They're not always going to use it. You're not going to find too many places that do 100% custom tool use because it's too much reinventing the wheel. But you want to find people that actually know when to put the standard tools away and get down doing custom things.
Sure.
You want to find people who are going to actually sort of interview you as a client. They want to get to know you. They want to know how your business process works. They want to know who's involved. They want to know why they're involved. They want to know what you do. They want to know what your risks are. They want to know what your concerns are. Anybody who just comes in and says, okay, so what IP addresses are we going after? If it's not just a raw black box test, which almost nothing ever is anymore, they need to know a little bit more about that. And then sort of finally, but not entirely finally, you want somebody that's going to handle your communications as carefully as possible, especially the final report. They need to be able to get things to you. And encrypted zip is okay, and we have clients that do the encrypted zip thing. If you can set up a PGP key, that's so much better, because we can encrypt the file specifically to you, and that way we're not having to worry about sending you a password, over text message, or call you and give you the password or something like that, which those are always kind of difficult.
Don't y'all do some kind of secure drop or something like that, where you could just say, hey, here's a link, go to this website, it's SSL enabled?
And we've done that. And but at the same time, it still comes down to an encrypted zip. And it's easier for us. There's a certain amount of assurance that comes along with me sending a report to Brian Brake, instead of just sending a file to you and sending you the password, and then I have no idea who else is able to open it in the beginning. Now, after that, after you've opened it, that's a different story. But I can say I sent it to you, and you were the only one that should have been able to do that, because I encrypted it to your key specifically. And if you shared your password and your key, that's on you, not on us.
Yeah. So do you ever have to go to a client and go, okay, yeah, we send you stuff over PGP, and they're like, I don't know how to use that. Do you have to spend 10 minutes showing them how to use that? A
lot of places do that, and we'll basically, we'll suggest that they do PGP, and I'm sure we wouldn't have any difficulty or any issues with showing them how to use it. But a lot of them just kind of go, yeah, let's just do the encrypted zip.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to see more PGP use. The tools are free, but I will admit they're not the easiest thing to use. One of the best points that I've seen made in a long time was an article that Moxie Marlinspike wrote a couple of years ago about the failure of PGP. And the failure of PGP is that, yes, there are, I don't know, a few million people using it, but that's out of, like 4 billion internet users worldwide. So, there's an argument that it's failed as good as it is. So,
yeah.
But so red flags, though, when you're asking questions, if pwning, especially if that word comes up, is the dominant topic. Is, yeah, we're going to pwn you and we're going to drop all these shells. No, that's probably not somebody you want on your network.
Isn't that just a sign of lack of maturity, maybe on their part? They should be more, business-like in some cases.
It can be. It doesn't mean that they're technically inept, but if they come across in an extremely unprofessional sense, especially if your CEO happens to be on the call as well, that may not be the best thing. If they don't know the technical or the business impacts, you can have people that know business and they don't know really pen testing, and they don't understand what they're getting into. Like, this is actually one that I run into every once in a while now. If people are surprised when they use, when they come across an old unpatched Server 2008 box or Server 2003 box, and it's vulnerable to MSO 8067. That's everybody's default to go back to. The problem is MSO 8067 is really, really unstable. You can crash the server service, which if you're going against a workstation, it almost doesn't matter in most cases.
Yeah.
If you do that on the file server, nobody can get files anymore.
Right.
If you do it on the domain controller, other things break. So,
like authentication, that kind of thing?
I think there's some authentication pieces that can break, because you're basically knocking down 445.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and possibly some other things to go along with it. Anybody who comes in and is really technically savvy and has no idea what happens if you're not your domain control. Well, if your domain controller goes down, but like they don't really understand that your database server going down is bad. They're just like, well, fix it.
Yeah.
No, we're losing $100,000 an hour when our database server is down. That's a bad thing. Anybody who issues you a no crash guarantee, we will not crash any of your systems. You can't make that promise.
Does that just mean they're not trying hard enough?
It means they're not sending any traffic. I crashed a printer by doing a port scan.
Well, yeah, I can see that.
I sent a few half open, Synax, and it couldn't handle the number that I sent. And I didn't send many. I think I did like the top 500 ports or something like that against it, and it crashed.
Yeah, it was probably an HP printer.
It was an older printer. I don't think it was an HP printer.
Well,
I think it was like one of the whatever the company that made the Fireys was. I think that might have been what it was. But it was an old printer, and I knocked it over, and they got upset, and I was like, well, I didn't think a port scan was going to knock it over, but
my bad.
You never know.
Yeah.
I kind of touched on this before. If they don't ask you anything, like they're just like, give us some targets and you know, and a check.
Yeah,
that's not a good thing.
It does inspire confidence.
Yeah, and anytime that they start sending you critical information in the clear. Now, every once in a while, this really shouldn't happen. Every once in a while, somebody slips on something. You know, a password gets sent over unencrypted email or something along those lines. It's okay to call them on that. Perfectly. Yeah. Anytime that they violate communications procedures, it's perfectly fine to call them on. But if they're sending you the report in the clear, you have no idea who else is seeing it. You don't know whether it was, it was picked up by the NSA or something like that. These can become, this can become a real problem. And if it just gets sent clear text, or if it gets, uploaded to a web server that has no protection whatsoever, you have no idea who else has seen it. And they're not likely to let you see the logs unless, it ends up going into court or something like that.
That's true.
So, so one of the things that even within Guardian's clients, and a lot of our clients are quite a bit savvier than the sort of average client. We run into this. They don't want to do social engineering because, okay, well, we offer these services and, social engineering is, well, we don't need to do social engineering because we're vulnerable. Yes, you are vulnerable. Do it anyway.
So wait.
You don't know how vulnerable. So let's say we just do a basic thing. We do a phishing campaign. It's most common social engineering anywhere in the industry.
Yeah.
We do a phishing campaign and we get 27% hit rate.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that good? Is that bad? You don't know.
Yeah.
27% hit.
It depends on what you get from that 27%. If you get 27% of low level, security, non-security people, but if you get 27% and, half of them are your local sysadmins or something, that's probably better.
Yes. And, that is a key thing, is who's actually falling for it. If your admins are falling for it, if your security people are falling for it.
Yeah. It's your CEO is falling for it and he sends you money, then,
We get so many customers that say, yeah, don't send to the CEO.
Please,
how about the CEO secretary? Don't send to the CEO secretary. She gets feisty.
She clicks on everything. You have no idea.
All the more reason to do it. But here's the thing. So you do 27% this year. Do it again next year. Next year you get 18%. Okay, you're still vulnerable. Yes, we still got around, but you improved. You got like a third less.
Yep.
Next year 12% or 10% or something like that. Maybe now's you want to see that kind of improvement. And as things improve, maybe we start trying some new things. Instead of sending to 400 people, maybe we send to like 12. But instead of spending a week putting this together and getting all the infrastructure together and sending things off and poking around in the systems, we instead spend a week collecting information about them. We find out the schools that they went to. We find out, their interests, possibly even as far as getting into who their family is. You've had a couple of people on in the past that have talked about this, and it's a really creepy thing. I'm the first person to admit it is a really creepy thing. The properly done SE does not have limits.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about that with my wife because of who she works for and who I work for. And, they could get to me through her, sending me an email through her email account or something. Or
I could get to you. I could get to you by sending you something that comes from your kid's school saying you need to read this.
Yeah.
If it looks legitimate enough, if I spend enough time on it and get samples of their letterhead and all that stuff, I can probably convince you to open it up. And there's a few things, one, I mean, you might not be likely to click on the enable macros button, but a lot of people are. And even if not, maybe there's just a vulnerability in Word that you don't know about, and I can still get the code to execute anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
All kinds of possibilities. But but keep in mind that there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing SE. There's email, there's instant messaging, which is not nearly as common as it used to be. But there's social media, there's media drops, there's physical security, literally walking up to people and or walking up to facilities and trying to get in. There's personal stuff, talking to people and trying to get information about them. Meet them, find out where all the people at the company hang out, and you go to the bar and you get to you overhear things. You get to talk to them. If you have the right equipment, you get copies of their badges. So
yeah, one of my friends said that if you live in a city with a big company and they have, say, employee shuttles. I won't name the company specifically, but
there's a lot of companies that have employee shuttles, so you don't even need a company.
And you just happen to get on that company's shuttle, and people are on there having meetings, discussing sensitive information, or you can find out where people work or people's names, or that kind of thing. I mean, it's easy to get that kind of OSINT just by listening in on conversations of people who oh, everybody works for this company, it's cool. Well, not everybody working for that company needs to be everything.
And you're sitting there fiddling with your phone for the entire 35-minute trip in, and you're not doing anything on your phone except recording.
That's right. So we're at over an hour right now, and that was just to discuss the before part of the exam, the pen test. So I think we're going to have to keep the during and after for another podcast, sir.
Okay, fair enough. Actually, there is a couple of things that I want to touch on real quick that kind of are for expectations as you're going in that are from the after the test.
Okay.
And it gets into the reactions to the report.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to come back and talk about these in a little bit more detail on a future date. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe in the next few weeks, we'll see. But okay. You need to be prepared for a report to come in that is worse than you think it is. And I'll give you a quick little story. Biggest pen test that I was ever a part of was when I was still out in California. And we got, I think the pen test report that came back was like 300 pages long, which, first of all, no report should ever actually be that long. If it's that long, it needs to get broken up into volumes that are a little more targeted. But we got this gigantic report, and the CIO got it, and he ordered everybody to delete it.
Wow. Okay.
Because it was embarrassing.
It was so damning. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're just like, this is all the stuff that we've been telling you guys.
Yeah.
But you want us to get rid of this report now. So, but be prepared that things are going to be worse than you think they are. Your security people may think that they are the absolute best in the world, and you and they may be in for a very, very big surprise. So you need to set expectations that people that are not familiar with the architecture, that are not as familiar with the architecture, may find things that you didn't think. This is actually very similar to cryptography. There's a line in cryptography, it's a warning line, that says anybody can write an algorithm that they cannot break.
Yep.
And it's because you get convinced of some particular way to do things, and ultimately you're not very good at looking at your own work and figuring out a way to break it. Somebody else can come along and go, oh, yeah, right there. That's the easy way to do it. And, I can now break your encryption. Same thing with the network. I walk into networks that, people have spent long periods of time building up lots of money, and I look at them and I go, oh, right there. Because we do security analysis stuff too. We're our architecture analysis. Not everybody likes doing it. I actually do kind of enjoy it. But it's something where I bring in my own practices from the past, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, if I can find a way into this spot, which you've got a YMCA or something that's next door. You have no idea, how many people are coming in and out. It's not unusual for unknown people to show up. The people might be sitting in you might be sitting next to a strip mall.
Yeah. And
somebody comes in and they've got a good size wireless setup, and they're able to attack your network, and you didn't even think about that because you thought you had a good wireless implementation, but now they're popping in and they're taking over your network, and you didn't. You're barely aware that they're there. So.
Yeah. So obviously when you get the report, you want to know that you don't want to attack the people who are going out of their way to try to help you be more secure.
Yep.
It would make sense. The deletion thing that was pretty extreme. I mean, if he was just trying to memory hole the thing like it didn't exist any further, that kind of sucks. But um, I mean, you hear about that a lot, though. It's where and I don't know if it's just security researchers, but they did such a good job that they're embarrassed that happened, and they don't want people to know that happened. So obviously they'll try to lawyer up, try to do strong arm tactics to try to stop that from being, put out there. But if you guys have a proper NDA between you, you're not going to be going, "Oh, this company sucks" or whatever. I mean, unless you're doing it in generic terms on podcast. But you're not allowed to name names because that can damage the reputation of your company, not just their company. I mean, that can be bad for your own business. So I mean, there's a lot that, I mean, obviously you've got some good reactions here, making sure that there's a mitigation plan to get rid of those. You're altering your awareness program to fix some shortcomings. So I mean, there's a lot of good stuff to discuss. Yeah. The need to know thing is important. I mean, that we do that with questionnaires and stuff in my office here. But I tell them, okay, yeah, here's this thing, here's this deliverable that I have to give you for whatever it is we sell. And I'm like, even though we have an NDA, distribute on a need to know basis. So not everybody needs to have that information. Even if there is an NDA. I come from old school Navy where it's like, you may have, the access, but you don't necessarily need to know that kind of stuff. Yep. So yeah, that's very good information to remember when you're getting your reports or your deliverables in this case.
You need to know the code word for your watch. You don't need to know the code word for the next watch.
Exactly. So, well, I think we need to go because we're way over time. And I definitely want to have you back to talk about the stuff during the test and after the test, and not just because of the report bit. But there's this is a really good information for those companies or people out there who are maybe afraid to even get a pen test because they don't even know how to get, to start that process. So that's something that's this has been really good information. So, well, okay. For instance, if somebody wanted to get a pen test and they weren't sure exactly how to go about doing that, how would they get a hold of you or your company in this case?
You can get a hold of me directly. It's Jarrod, Jarrod, at inguardians.com. I will probably actually put you in touch with Jamie. She handles the sales stuff, and I'm happy to let her handle the sales stuff. She's much better at it than I am.
Okay.
And I think we also have a sales at inguardians.com, but if you pop over onto the InGuardians website, we've got the appropriate contact links there. As far as getting directly in contact with me, you can send me an email to that address. You can give me at Jarrod Frates on Twitter. By the way, if you do go to send me something to my InGuardians address, you can also look up my PGP key. It's up on the MIT key server.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, awesome. And if you find you need a pen test or application review or anything like that, you can just reach out to InGuardians. They don't sponsor us, and they don't pay us to say that. I just Larry Pesce and Jay Beal and Jarrod Frates and of course Adam Crompton and Tyler Robinson. We had them on a couple of weeks ago. They pretty sharp dudes, pretty sharp cats. They seem to know what they're talking about. So, so you can get a hold of BreakSec, our Breaking Security podcast here. We're on Twitter. Mr. Betcher's at BetcherPwned. Our official Twitter is at BreakSec. And you can follow me at Brian Brake. That's with a Y, Bryan, Brake. Thanks to our patrons who like to leave a little sum in our tip jar every month to help offset the costs of preparing the podcast and hosting it. We have a website, www.breakingsecurity.com. We're on TuneIn radio app. We're on the Google Play Store. We're in iTunes. If you're in iTunes, feel free to leave us some feedback on there because we like see our rankings go up on that from time to time. I think that's it. Jarrod, thank you for filling in for Mr. Betcher this week. It was much appreciated. I'm sure he appreciates it too. And we'll definitely have you back to talk about communication, what's going on during the pen test, what happens after the pen test, things to not do during the pen test or after the pen test. So that'll be another good discussion, I have a feeling. So, are you going to be speaking anywhere? I know you said you're going to possibly be at DerbyCon, hopefully, with us.
Yeah. I know I'm going to be at DerbyCon. I've got lodging and transportation have been arranged, and tickets have been purchased, and all of that. I will be there. Most of, or a good chunk of Guardians will be there.
Cool.
And I don't know that I will be speaking. I have had some things in my personal life that have come up that have sort of derailed my plans of putting together presentations. I've got a couple of good ideas for a talk, or at least I think they're good ideas. Whether they do, but I don't know. We'll see if I can get the stuff in by the August 1st deadline.
Awesome. Okay. So Mr. Betcher will be back next week. Probably I want to talk about our CTF that just ended, who won and everything, because that ended. We have somebody won a free ticket to DerbyCon. We still have one for our drawing. If you want to get in on that, you can listen to our episode 17 of 2016 to find out about how to get into the drawing for that. And I think we'll do a quick write-up or a quick walkthrough on how our CTF went. I think you'll find it interesting. I know a lot of people, including folks like Tyler Hudak, Sek Shoggoth, found it quite engaging. So come on back.
None of us have easy Twitter handles these days.
No, I know, right? Odd. Okay. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Thanks for everybody listening, and we'll talk to you again real soon. We'll do 10 seconds of silence, and then I'll bring you in, and then we can get started.
Starting. You remember how to pronounce my name?
Frates.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. I was going back through old shows, and you slipped on one just a few months after I was on.
Wow, man. What kind of person do you think I am? Yeah, I got this. I am a professional at this.
Yeah. How much do you get paid?
I am. Well, you know what? Every time I get it wrong, I'll give you half of what I get paid from this podcast.